2026 is going to be an awesome year. We got some pretty cool stuff coming up. First off, we got Foundations of Recovery. This is our flagship program. We're starting it in January.
This is for anyone, man, woman, or couple who wants to come and reclaim their heart from shame, trauma, and betrayal. We start off with an education on all sorts of principles, give you the common language. We feed you from a fire hose in terms of all things recovery.
It is such a great start to recovery. And we get at the roots of things, Tyler. This isn't like any other program. Like, this is our healing journey in process, and Foundations is where we begin.
If you look at the value that you're getting there to kick off a good recovery with all of the right education, all of the right language, and a team to get you started while also being directed by Brandon and myself through the whole process, what a deal.
So if you're interested, if you're struggling, if you've been wanting to do something for a long time, jump into this. This only comes around every so often, and we would love to have you there.
Click the link in the description to sign up for it. And to make it even sweeter, we're also including a raffle for a free pass to the Radiant Dawn retreat. Anyone who signs up for Foundations will be added to the raffle for that free Radiant Dawn pass. If you're a man and you sign up for Foundations, your name still gets entered, and you can give that pass away if you win it to any woman that you want to.
So what you're saying, Tyler, is if you sign up and participate in Foundations, you could possibly go to Radiant Dawn for free?
That's exactly what I'm saying, which is crazy because Foundations by itself is already an insane value.
Man, I sound so salesy. But it actually is awesome. So come to Foundations. And even if you don't come to Foundations, sign up for Radiant Dawn. It's beyond therapy, the best healing experiences that you can have.
Click the link below and come join us. How can I find victory through the principle of surrender?
What's up, you guys? Welcome to the Therapy Brothers podcast. I'm Brandon.
I'm Tyler. We're brothers.
We're therapists.
We're not afraid of your questions.
So bring it.
What is up, you guys? We've got a really great question today, a good topic, something that I've been thinking about a lot myself today. And the last few days, actually, and I want to tell a couple of stories around this topic. But before we get into that, I'm just going to jump into our review. This review comes from Jim C. And he says, awesome podcast. He says, I really appreciate the podcast. I see progress in my life through the application of so many things you guys have shared. Thank you. I have a suspicion that I might know Jim, and thank you for the review, Jim. It's always nice to get that feedback. Brennan and I talk frequently about whether or not we're making the right kind of a difference in the world and in the lives of the people that we interact with, and it's nice to get that feedback. So thank you for sharing. Any of you who are listening and have been listeners, and if you appreciate what you're getting here, we would love to also hear from you. Your reviews help us to be able to reach more people. They allow us to have a greater impact and to kind of get the message out that we're sharing here. So if you're finding value, we sure appreciate your ratings and reviews, and also just the feedback that you're continually giving us, even when it's not through ratings and reviews. Before we jump into our topic today, I just wanted to also mention a couple of things. We are continuing to grow as a podcast, and we're always looking for other people who might be willing to come on the show and ask their questions or have a discussion with us. You can listen to some of our past episodes to see sort of what that format looks and feels like. And it adds depth of richness to the podcast when we have real people on with real issues. And so if you have questions for us, whether that's through written word, you can go to therapybros.com and submit a question via the written word, or you can also go there and submit the request to come on the show and actually have a discussion with us. We welcome those things. We love talking with the people that we've had on so far. It's been really fun for me to have a number of conversations with people who are total strangers, and yet there's so much to connect to in those short conversations that we have. So just know that that's available, and we welcome your questions. Let's jump into our topic today. This is a really good topic, the topic of surrender. It's something that's really confusing. We talk about it a lot in my treatment. In our group work, we talk a lot about the principle and idea of surrender. And I think sometimes it's a little bit confusing. It's a simple concept to understand once you understand it, but it's also one of those things that's hard to put into practice and in our own life because there's an emotional component that doesn't necessarily always line up with the rational component. So I'm just going to read our question here, and then we'll get into this a little bit. This is a really good question. It says, first, I want to tell you how much I appreciate your podcasts, all of them. Thank you for what you're doing. Please don't ever quit. So thank you. That's almost like another review. We appreciate that. Here's the question. It says, I was recently introduced to the concept of, quote, surrendering, and it feels like exactly what I need to do. However, the idea seems so abstract, I'm having trouble wrapping my brain around how it's done. I've heard my husband talk about it a lot in relation to his 12-step program, but this is the first time I've heard about it in reference to recovery from the betrayal side. I can identify things I want to surrender. I can say the words, I surrender this, but there must be more to it than that. Will you please walk me through what it really looks like to surrender something? And here's the background information. D-Day was close to 2 years ago, and my husband has been sober ever since then and sincerely working recovery for over a year. I see all of the work he's doing, and it feels sincere. It feels trustworthy, and I really want to move forward. What I'm running into is a feeling of being held back by my own fear and by some really big, thick walls I have. And these walls are what I really want to surrender. I know I need to bring the walls down in order for us to really connect, but I just can't figure out how to do it. I've done some EMDR and a lot of talk therapy, online programs, workbooks, and group. Nothing I've tried has worked, and I'm getting really frustrated. When something seemingly small happens, I can feel my walls going up, and now I'm aware of myself enough to notice, but I can't stop it from happening. I suspect that I'm still carrying some childhood trauma. My dad was bipolar and a little physically and emotionally abusive. He committed suicide when I was 10, and my mom, understandably, went off the deep end for several years. I recently learned that shortly before he died, my dad told my mom that he was a monster and he didn't deserve to live. My mom found child pornography in his possession after he died, and 2 of my sisters are in treatment for sexual abuse. My therapist also told me that I had a lot of signs of sexual abuse, but I have no memories of that. I'm wondering if these walls could be keeping me safe from those things. Is this something I can just learn to surrender? Okay, this is great. Thank you so much for being willing to share your question and yourself this way. There's a lot to this question. I think that you're on the right track with the things you're doing. Like it looks like you're highly committed in what you're doing. You've done a lot of different kinds of programming and treatment, and I think all of those things are really good. There might be something to your question around continued trauma work with whatever that is. That EMDR process could continually be maybe helpful. Sounds like you've done some of that before, and you'll know kind of how that works. But yeah, this idea of surrender. Let's talk about the idea of surrender in kind of a broad scale, and then narrow it down a little bit. So when you hear the word surrender, and especially when you come to some place like a therapist or something, and they tell you that the best way to win is by surrendering, that sounds counterintuitive, right? We don't win by surrendering. We live in a world that teaches us that we can't win if we surrender. We associate surrendering with giving up. We associate surrendering with failure. Any movie that you watch, any war movie that you watch, when that white flag gets raised, there's that sense of failure and letdown that comes along with it. And in our own lives, when we're taught to surrender something, I think that sometimes that's the connotation that we hear it in, is that it's a bad thing for me to surrender because surrendering means giving up and failing. And today I'd like to talk a little bit, maybe broaden that scope of thinking about the term surrender, and maybe explain some ways as to how it actually works to provide freedom and liberation rather than being trapped and stuck. So I wanted to start with the definition, and this is part of the reason why I think there's a problem with the concept we talk about. Here's a couple of things to think about definitions. It says a couple definitions here of surrender. To surrender is to yield the power, control, or possession of another upon compulsion or demand. Another definition, to give up completely or agree to forgo, especially in favor of another. Or the third definition, to give oneself up into the power of another, especially as a prisoner. So even those definitions, you hear that and go, oh, I'm being forced by compulsion, or I'm giving myself over to be a prisoner. why would I want to surrender? And that's a good question. Like, none of us want that. In fact, one of the things that we prize most in our life is our ability to have agency and choice. It's one of the few gifts that we were given the minute we were born. We basically came into this world with two things. We were given a body that allows us to have experience, and we were given choice. And that choice allows us to decide how we use our body and our brain in gaining the experience that we're going to gain and have the learning that we're going to have. And so now all of a sudden we're being told that one of the things that we need to learn to do is give over our sense of choice. And the truth is that when we do that, that's by nature the definition of an addiction, is that we establish a habit and a pattern of some sort that takes my ability to choose away. It becomes so automated that it's just a habit, and now it takes no brain power, and it becomes this, like, the scriptures refer to it as a flaxen cord that gets wound around us until it's this strong binding cord that leads us to us being trapped. And in a sense, that is one way that we maybe sometimes surrender our agency, but it's in an unhealthy way that we surrender our agency to become a prisoner to those things. And so the idea is that we have to be able to give something away. We have to be able to have our choice to give our agency away, or to give our control over certain things away. And in doing so, there are some ways that we can become free in that sense. And so let's talk about those things. In recovery work, when you mentioned the 12 steps in the question that was asked today, in recovery work, you have something called the Serenity Prayer. And I think everybody's very familiar with the Serenity Prayer, but the Serenity Prayer strikes right at the heart as to what we're really getting at when we talk about surrender. And the Serenity Prayer says, God, grant me the serenity to accept the things I cannot change, the courage to change the things I can, and the wisdom to know the difference. In those simple words lies a huge portion of what it means to surrender. I'm going to say it one more time. God, grant me the serenity to accept the things I cannot change, the courage to change the things I can, and the wisdom to know the difference. If I'm living a life where I am able to take an assessment of my life and the things that are happening in my life, I can accept the things that I cannot change, meaning there are things every single day that are outside of my control. There are things that I truly have no ability to have an influence on. Things happen to me. It sounds like, this person who submitted our question today, it sounds like you've had a number of things happen in your life that happened through no choice of your own, through no fault of your own, that life has dealt you certain hands. And that's true for all of us. Every one of us could look at our life right now and look at a number of things that are going on in our life right now that actually have nothing to do with us or our own choices. And the hard thing is that most of us, we get stuck on the things that are actually outside of our control because they feel out of control and they scare us. And we have a tendency to put all our time and energy into those places. And in doing so, we burn ourselves out. We grow resentments. We feel helpless and powerless. And we use up the energy that we have on the things that we really don't have much control over. And then we're depleted and worn out. Whereas if we go to the second part of the Serenity Prayer, the courage to change the things I can, and wisdom to know the difference. If I'm spending my time and my energy in the places that I actually have some real control over, I'm way more likely to be productive. I'm way more likely to feel like I have some sense of semblance of control in my life because I'm now using my energy for something that can help me to grow or become better or to improve my situation. And I'm using the limited finite resource of my emotional energy in ways that can be beneficial to me and to the people around me, instead of spending all of my time and energy on things that are just going to cause me misery and make me feel powerless. And the wisdom to know the difference is its own beast, right? Like we get stuck back and forth. And here's a little exercise that you can do right off the bat with this is to actually sit down with anything in your life that you're struggling with. Our caller here that submitted the question is struggling with learning how to let go or break down the walls that don't allow for trust in a relationship, right? There's probably several things that are beyond control. Like, you don't have control over whether or not you know for sure your husband's in actual recovery, although it sounds like he is, and you get a really good sense of that. You probably have a good gut feeling in that. The truth is you don't have control as to whether or not he's going to act out tomorrow or tonight. You don't have that control, right? What you do have control over is the way that you're seeing the situation, the way you might approach your partner, your spouse, the way you might approach yourself with compassion and kindness and patience in the process of learning to let go of these walls or lay these things down. Those are the things that you have control over. So one of the things that you can do when you're looking at any situation is to ask yourself a question, and it's going to sound kind of silly, but ask yourself, what's the situation? And then follow it up with, how much control do I have in this situation? And give it a percentage. Do some thinking and give it a percentage. Maybe I feel like I have 50% control over this situation. All right. So now you've got your 50%. Line out what your 50% is. What are the things that you actually have control over in the situation? And also map out the 50% that's not yours. What is the 50% or whatever percentage you gave that isn't yours? Map out the details of it. I don't have control over my husband's choice. I don't have control over whether or not he's going to work his recovery. I don't have control over whether or not he's going to respond to me with patience and kindness and empathy. What I do have control over is the way that I might choose to approach him, or the exercise that I might put in to seeking to lay down my walls, right? So once I've mapped out what's mine and what's not mine, then I can ask myself the next question, which is, am I doing everything within my own percentage? And if the answer is yes, then the practice is to say, okay, I'm doing everything I can surrender and let it go. Why worry? There's no need to worry anymore. I'm doing everything that I physically can in my realm of what I have control over. There's no need to worry, because there's nothing to worry about right now in terms of what I have control over, right? If the answer to that same question is no, then why worry? Get busy doing what's in your 50%. There's nothing to stress about. You just have things that you can work on that you do have some control over. And so you can get busy doing those things. So the trick to this is that either way you go, there's no need to worry. You have something to do. You're either already doing everything you can, so there's nothing to worry about, or there's something that you can do, so there's nothing to worry about until you've done everything you can. So just kind of a mental trick that you can play with yourself to remind yourself, almost make it a game. It's a way of putting things back into the realm of what you do have control over and surrendering over the things that are outside of your control. So there's something else to surrender here, and I want to go back to the definitions that we were talking about a little bit in these definitions that I think is also missed in this, because it's something that we all struggle with on a certain level. Every one of us is in a constant wrestle with something or somebody bigger than ourselves. I happen to believe that is God for me, and I'm a Christian. I believe in Jesus Christ and the power of Christ and his atonement, and there's something bigger there. But sometimes when we get kicked around in life, that wrestle that we have with understanding and having a relationship with a higher power or something bigger than ourselves becomes strained. It becomes damaged. It's difficult. It's hard to rely on somebody when you feel like you've been hurt or burned or not protected by that higher power, that higher force. And yet that's the place that we're expected and asked to go in order to find that freedom that comes with the power of surrender. And so I want to just read this definition again, and I want to just talk a little bit about this concept of a higher power is that to completely give up or agree to forgo, especially in favor of another, or to give up to the power of another, especially as a prisoner. If I were to go and give my agency, give my power, give my control to anybody else, to anyone else, to my husband, to my friends, to my boss, I would feel like I was betraying myself and I was giving over maybe one of the best gifts that I have, right? The only place where we can actually effectively surrender is to a higher power, is to somebody or something that's bigger than us. And every one of us is in desperate need of that higher power, because if there's not a higher power to give things over to, if there's not somebody or something to give ourselves over to with the things that we don't have control, we are completely hosed. Because now we're expected to play God in our own lives and to have control and to fix things that are unfixable for us. And that's going to lead to a lot of powerlessness and helplessness and frustration. And yet, if we have somebody bigger than ourselves to give those things to, it allows us to take a burden that we're carrying and to get it off of our own shoulders and to give it over to somebody else. I had an interesting experience when we were in Hawaii last week. I took my family to Hawaii, had a great trip. We enjoyed ourselves immensely. On one of the days, we decided to drive this really windy road to the top of a mountain, top of the volcano. And along the windy road, it was just this blissful moment for me. I just had this wonderful time. We had our kids sitting out, hanging out the windows on this one-lane road and just feeling the wind and driving through a rainforest. And it was just wonderful. And as we were driving up the road, I noticed that on this single blacktop paved road, that the road started to look green. And I could tell that it was still asphalt, but it looked green. And so I slowed down. I looked down through the pavement there and noticed that the jungle was actually trying to grow up through the road, this asphalt. And so there were little sprigs of green grass coming up through the whole road, even though it was still a road. And I sat and I thought about that for a minute, and it occurred to me that in a lot of ways, this might be a metaphor for our lives a little bit, that we as men, we come and we try to assert our dominion and our control and our power to make things consistent and steady and secure. And we come to a place, namely this world, that isn't actually built that way. The world was built wild. The road that I was driving on was literally a road that had been laid down on the top of a volcano that at one point been a fiery scene of lava and desolation, and yet over the years had turned into this now massively wild, overgrown jungle of tropical flowers and plants and life. And man had come through at some point and laid down a road. And that road will be functional for a while until nature decides to take its course again, and either the grass will grow up through that road and destroy it, or the lava will flow again and blow out those roads, and there'll be need to create something new. And in a lot of ways, I think that that's how we sometimes live our lives, is that we put more stock on the road that's been laid down than we do on the power of nature that was underneath it in the first place, and that eventually will claim whatever it wants to claim. And in a sense, the power of nature becomes the power of God, where God is going to have the world operate in a sometimes unfair way. It's going to operate according to agency and choice of other people, because that's something that we all get when we come here, is the ability to choose. And sometimes those choices cause pain and frustration and sickness and everything else. And often we're trying to live a life based on the road that's there, the man-made parts of things, or we're trying to hold on to some semblance of control by laying down our own road. And we do that for a good reason. We do that for self-protection a lot. When we've been hurt, when we've been wounded, we're looking for ways to not be hurt and wounded. And so we look for ways to control things. And yet that straining for control, when it's actually outside of the realm of our own control, it causes us deeper suffering. And if we could come to a place of acceptance that life is going to offer us pain, Life is going to offer us struggle, sometimes even when it's not our fault. And if we could learn to embrace that that's part of what life is, it doesn't mean we always have to like it, but it means we suffer less because we don't have to disagree with it when it's just the way things are. And if we could surrender ourselves over to something bigger than ourselves, if we could give ourselves back to the power of nature, to God, to the reality of the way things are, instead of trying to dictate to God how he should be God, or instead of trying to be God ourselves and try to control everything within the realm of our lives, even though a lot of that is beyond our control, we instantly suffer less. We're actually able to let go of so much that there is no need to worry about because we can't control it. Right? I live close to the volcano in Yellowstone. When that thing blows, there's a pretty good chance that I die. And there's nothing that I can do about it. And I can spend every single day worrying about that and trying to control it and trying to build some massive plug that could plug up the crater of where it's going to blow. At the end of the day, that's not going to do anything. That's going to do nothing but cause me to suffer more, to put in effort that ultimately doesn't do anything. And at the end of the day, me and my family are still going to die. That's just the way that it is. And I don't have to like it. I definitely don't want the volcano to blow tomorrow, but that's the way it is. That's the way the world operates. And when we can surrender to the way that things are, then it gives us the ability to have our choice back. We get a chance to now make our choice and decision based off of the reality of things instead of living in the would-haves and should-haves of non-acceptance, of not surrendering. And so when we talk about surrendering, I would say that what we're looking at is we're looking at being able to reclaim our choice to give ourselves over to our higher power. We're not giving up. We're not giving up at all. What we're doing is we're choosing to surrender our will over to the reality of the way things are. And we're choosing to put something, in the hands of a higher power, call it faith, in knowing that we can't control certain things anyway. And so we have to be able to give those things over. Think about the power of forgiveness. There are things that I've done in my life to other people. There are things that I've done to my wife in the past that I wish I could take back, that I wish I could fix, and that are truly actually unfixable by me. If I don't have a higher power to give those things to, I'm stuck. I can't continue to progress. If I can give those things over to a higher power, it allows me room to continue to progress and grow. That's the power of surrender. And in essence, what we're doing when we surrender is we're choosing to give our will and our power back to the will of something or someone bigger than us, to God. And in doing so, we align ourselves with the way that things are. In essence, we align ourselves with God, and then we can continue to make our choices accordingly. So I want to give you guys a practice or two that you can use to practice this idea of surrender. One of the ways that I teach my clients sometimes to practice surrender is I have them develop what we call a God's inbox. And get yourself a shoebox. I've got, we don't have video for everyone, but I've got this thing right here. This is it's a shoebox for just my listeners. It's a shoebox that my daughter has turned into a narwhal that she used for her Valentine's just a while back at school. And it's just a shoebox with a slit in it. Create your own God's inbox. And every time you find yourself running into one of those places where you realize that you're going to be worried or stressed or anxious about something that's beyond your control, physically take a piece of paper, write down what that is, and practice putting it in the box, physically letting it go. Practice physically letting go of that worry. And of course, it may come back in a few moments. And if you need to, write it down on a new piece of paper and give it away again. And practice giving those things over, realizing that there's nothing that I can worry about here because I can't control it. So I'm going to give it away. I'm going to give it to something different. And so that idea of God's inbox can be really helpful for certain clients of mine that that physical practice of giving it away can work really well. There's also some meditations that you can do that are aimed specifically at surrender. And I just direct you, you type in some type of surrender imagery for mindfulness practice in YouTube or in your app, whatever app you're using for your meditations, and you'll be able to find some of those things. And then here's one more practice that you might try. And this is just called willing hands. And it goes along with the principle called radical acceptance out of dialectical behavioral therapy. And it's really just opening your posture. Sit in an open position or stand in an open position, kind of open your hands, open your body posture, take a deep breath, and then think about the situation that you're in that you really need to let go of, and practice just with open hands saying, I don't like this. I can't change it. I'll accept it. I don't like this. I can't change it. I'll accept it. And practice the physical act of receiving the reality of things. It doesn't mean you don't like it. That's okay if you don't like it. It doesn't mean you're still not going to make a choice, but you're going to make that choice now based in reality. And that's the practice where I'm now giving myself back to the way things are so that I can then make my choices. So I don't like that my husband has an addiction. Okay, I can't change that. I'll accept that he has an addiction. Does it mean I'm going to accept all of the things that come with the addiction? No. It means I'm going to have to make some choices based off of the reality that my husband has an addiction. I was sexually abused as a child. Okay, I don't like that. It causes me to cringe inside to think about how many people have been sexually abused as a child and the implications in their life, right? Truth is if I was sexually abused as a child, I don't have to like it, but I have to accept the reality that that's part of what's happened in my life. And if I accept that reality, now I can make some choices to decide how I want to go about getting myself better. If I can't accept that reality, I'll never make the choices to get myself better. And that's the way that the principle of surrender works, is I have to move to a place of acceptance of reality. And then I have to give over a lot of those things that are beyond my control to God. I will just end with maybe just this last little thought in terms of the idea of surrender, is that when we choose to give ourselves to something bigger, we actually align ourselves with something more powerful than ourselves. We are actually signing up, in a sense, for greater power. And it made me think of a poem. They have these gifts. We have our body and we have our ability to choose. And this poem, Invictus, it says, out of the night that covers me, black is the pit from pole to pole. I thank whatever gods may be for my unconquerable soul. In the fell clutch of circumstance, I have not winced nor cried aloud. Under the bludgeonings of chance, my head is bloodied but unbowed. Beyond this place of wrath and tears looms but the horror of the shade, and yet the menace of the years finds and shall find me unafraid. It matters not how straight the gate, how charged with punishment the scroll. I am the master of my fate. I am the captain of my soul. Now, how does this apply to surrender? This is maybe the most beautiful thing in the whole principle of surrender is that when we understand that we are the master of our fate and the captain of our own soul, we now have the power to choose, using our agency, to give our lives and our will over to the will and power of God, our higher power. And we can then see things from a different lens that allow us to accept life as it is and to make choices accordingly instead of trying to stop life from happening the way that life happens. It's our ability to choose to give ourselves. The one thing that we come to this world with is to give our will and to turn and give it back to a higher power. There's something really beautiful and powerful in that. And it does lead to a feeling of burdens being lifted. It leads to a feeling of lightness emotionally. It leads to a place of being truly free. Free to now live life in reality and to live life on the terms that are actually in front of us and to make our choices accordingly. So hopefully that's helpful for you guys today. Just some thoughts. We were missing Brandon today. I forgot to excuse him. He's shooting some other videos, and so he covered me last week, and I'm covering him this week. And I just had a conversation with him earlier this week. And for those of you guys who know us and are trying to get to know us, I feel like I just need to express how grateful I am to work with someone like my brother Brandon. He has true passion for what he does. He is striving on a daily basis to try to live the things that we talk about here. And he's a great example to me. And I just feel impressed to for some reason, express my love and gratitude for the influence of a brother like that. And so thank you guys for listening. Hopefully this is valuable for you. We'd love to have more of your questions, and you guys have a great week.